Hello, indie lovers. Welcome back to another episode of Indie Choice Picks. And today, I've had the pleasure of interviewing a pretty mysterious person who goes by the name Ouroboros Moon. That's his Twitter handle, and that is the name he gave me in this interview. Now, Ouroboros Moon has a pretty interesting concept with his new campaign, Wicked. If you're into multiverse anime with a little Rick and Morty thrown in there, I think you will love this creation. So please sit back and relax, enjoy the show, and let me bring to you Ouroboros Moon. Wow, that's a little hard to say altogether. Anyway, let me bring to you Ouroboros Moon, the creator of Wicked. Enjoy. All right, Ari, thank you for coming on to the show. I believe we talked a little bit a while ago about your Kickstarters, but now I see that you have multiple projects that you've done in the past. So I'm going to open the floor up to you, give the audience who you are, what you do, your inspiration, and just tell them a little bit about yourself. The mic is yours.
Uh, it's Indiegogo actually.
Yes, Indiegogo. With that's where you're running Wicked, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, tell the audience about yourself.
Uh, I honestly don't really like talking about myself, but I work in video game development and programming and cybersecurity. I like reading comics. I play a lot of video games, but over time, when you begin to make video games, it kind of sucks the joy out of actually playing games.
Yeah, I know a lot of work goes into that, especially with coding and I mean just even the art aspect of creating a video game. Like hang on real quick. I have this huge Zelda making a champion or creating a champion book, and I'm reading it, and there's a lot of stuff that goes into making a video game. So I know exactly where you're coming from. I mean, this book is huge. It's heavy. I think it's at least 20 pounds worth of stuff in here. So I get you 100% for sure. So go ahead, continue.
The I got a cool Evangelion statue. The metal statue, the brand new ones. I think they're pretty limited, actually.
Yeah, that sounds cool. I kind of want to get one of
Uh,
those.
but about me, editorial and writing wise, you noticed I worked on a lot of visual novels, and I have worked on H-type games, which is essentially porn, but I'd rather not talk about that. Porn. You'd be surprised how much people put into porn aspects of the dialogue.
Oh yeah, I mean, people like to kind of deny it, but I mean, when it comes down to it, man, sex sells. I mean, whether
It does, but it's like 20, 30 page scenes. I edited one that was like 70K words. And it was about you played World of Warcraft. It's like orcs too. It wasn't even good.
I've heard about these things, and it just blows me away. I mean, sex is one of those things that wasn't prevalent when I was a kid, but I mean, like it's everywhere now. I mean, there's no escaping it. I mean, games that were rated M are now being played by 12-year-olds. I mean, my mom would have never let me play a rated M game, but I mean, basically every game that's popular today is rated M. So I guess parents aren't really much concerned with their child and what they're exposed to. But I mean, it's the new generation, so I really don't have a say in the matter, to be honest.
Yep. Uh, I've been trying to slowly work out H-type games and to more narrative storytelling. For
Mm-hmm.
example, I'm still writing slash editing, mainly writing or rewriting Himigami Detective, which is
Mm-hmm.
Princess Detective in Japanese. I've been doing that for like a half a year at this point, and it's been pretty long. Bloody Chronicles, that's going to have a DLC that comes out soon, which I did work on. And Moonlight Thief just released because I made a New Year resolution on my channel that one, I would try to get this comic out, and two, that I'd try to complete most of the games that I said I was going to work on. I ended up dropping one of them, uh, but I did write like 200 pages of the script for the actual story. It's kind of disappointing. But then I got like university and stuff like that, and I'm even still thinking about university right now because next week I have to hack into a server and take over a computer, which isn't takes time, but it's pretty cool.
Hmm.
But a lot of the inspirations that come from my book, Wicked, is a combination of both what I learned in university and what I experienced working in video games. Wicked is actually a video game in the sense that as the story is and where it takes place, the world's going to transform. And when it reaches its final stage, that's basically where the video game would start. I can initially continue the story from that point, but if it does blow up some point in the future, I would make a video game spin-off that would take place in its own little section. But
Hmm.
when you go to university, you got to take a lot of miscellaneous classes like environmental science and yada yada yada. So I incorporated some things that I learned from history class and environmental science, psychology 101, and applied it into the story because I honestly had nothing else better to do. But when it comes to writing beyond my portfolio, that's on my current Indiegogo page, I've actually been writing for quite a little bit of time, and I actually did have two published works that I want to say are currently available online. I checked the like last week or so, and I was able to find one of them. But before I worked on at Manga Gamer, not Manga Gamer. Is that what it's called? Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's called Manga Gamer.
Hmm.
That sells H-type games and stuff. I was going to work at Faku, but I didn't work at Faku. But when I was pretty much interloping and trying to figure out what's the next game thing I was going to work on, Faku was making a game. As you know, Faku now releases video games. But originally, I created this story or this script. I think it's still in the forums if you could find it. It was called Ubiquitous, and it was this prequel to this other series that I was going to write. And I bring this up because it's in Wicked as well. Because the story, which I'll talk about here a little bit later because it's a little bit complicated, but when I started writing Ubiquitous, basically the story took place in a library.
Hmm.
And as boring as that sounds, I had to make that entertaining. And basically the entire situation is that in this universe, if I ever played Near Automata, it's similar to that in the sense that humanity has died, and in this story, the entire Earth has become metal, and you play as this librarian or historian. I never really worked out the official terms. I could look in the script, but I'm currently doing something else. But you either played as a librarian or a historian, and due to the very fact that the human race was gone and the human race achieved singularity, if
Hmm.
you are familiar with that sci-fi concept,
Yeah.
as the player, you would pretty much interact with this code, and you were able to pretty much see the visions of other individuals and people, and could experience what they experienced, but you're a robot. But in addition to that, other part of the game was exploration, because before humanity ascended to singularity point, they pretty much populated the galaxy to some certain degree. So you could travel and go from place to place, and there's an overarching plot that's not fairly interesting. But getting back to Wicked, when I originally came up with the idea for the story, it was in 2016, and this was before I actually wrote that script. And this anime came out by Ray Hori, who writes Black Lagoon, called Recreators. Are you familiar with that
A
anime?
little bit. I've been lacking on my anime though, so
No.
not gonna lie.
Anyway, I personally believe anime is on the decline narratively wise with all this isekai stuff that's coming out and subpar stuff. But I respect Rihori as a writer. Because of Black Lagoon, there's a lot of philosophical, interesting themes on existentialism and nihilism. And I also like the approach of the characters and the direction he takes it in, especially about the aspects of, well, they had this character named Rock. He's this everyday dude, and he's thrown into what you could be called equivalently of Madripoor from Marvel Comics. But in Black Lagoon, it's called Ranapura. It's basically this city that's just a den of thieves and thieves. It's pretty much Madripoor one from one. And the story is interesting because it actually takes place before 9/11.
Hmm.
So the Russian mafia and all the criminal organizations and the Mexican mob is basically this person that was a salaryman in Madripoor from Marvel Comics. But anyway, I respected him as a writer because he wrote that, and I really, really, really like it. And I remember most of the story and the plot because I like it. But then he made Recreators. And Recreators was this idea. I don't know how long he thought of it, but it didn't really seem well fleshed out or thought about really. But ultimately, when he made Recreators, because it looked like he was honestly transitioning from writing books to screenwriting, the entire basis of Recreators was there's video games, and the characters are from video games are entering our reality because I honestly don't remember. It was a really weak plot. But when he started writing that plot, I was making YouTube videos. And this was during the process of me actually sharing my opinion, what I genuinely thought about certain anime. And, some people just don't like that for some particular reason, because if you don't like what they like, that automatically makes you hostile.
Yeah, I've been a victim of people who necessarily I won't agree with in terms of what they like or what's right or what's wrong, and the sense of political correctness going around. And just because you disagree, you're automatically an enemy. And that's literally not the case. I know exactly where you're coming from for sure.
Yeah. Anyway, if you go to my anime list and you looked at Recreators, there's some people that enjoy it, but I believe the top or first couple reviews are just like extremely negative. For like, it's like out of a 10 score, it's getting a 3 or a 5
Mm-hmm.
because it wasn't a good anime. But people were just so engrossed in the concept of, well, you got this video game character entering our reality. And I'm like, this is a bad anime. And in the video, I go through like a big list of all the reasons why this anime was bad and why I preferably didn't like it, because the writing was really weak. And, priorly, as I said, he wrote Black Lagoon, which is just a very dark series. But then he goes and writes superhero-esque battles that are going over the city where no one's getting hurt. You have this giant mech that shows up and no one sees it for some reason. And it's just excuse after excuse from plotline to plotline that is just either nonsensical or just completely unbelievable. And at some point I said, I could write something way better than this on my, part-time. And I did it. And that was wicked. And then I began developing the story. That was like 2 years ago.
I mean, that's usually how those kind of things go. I was watching actually, funny story actually, because the comic that I'm working on now, um, it's kind of based on. I watched a Netflix. I guess I'm not a fan of Netflix anymore. Netflix to me has just like, just it's nothing good on Netflix. But I did come across this new movie that's coming out. I think later on this month or next month about two African American kids who develop time travel, and they're prodigies, they're kids, and I'm like, man, we haven't seen a smart black kid since that one show Smart Guy, and I'm like, this might be a pretty cool, kind of movie for young kids. It doesn't matter what race you are or anything like that, but I mean, these kids develop time travel, and it's kind of like one of those inspiring things. Like, do well in school, go get smart, learn how to do your math, stuff like that. Maybe you can develop time travel, you know, just like in a kind of inspirational way. But the reason why they create time travel is to go back to stop an officer-related killing. And I go, you had an awesome concept there, great concept, and you had to go and ruin it by something like that. And I'm like, that's the reason why most African American protagonists do certain things is racially motivated. And I go, man, that was such a great concept. You could have literally done anything else regarding a story but that. And so I started writing my own story that doesn't necessarily pertain to race, but it still has the whole concept of a young kid who's obviously black, creates time travel, and he goes back in time to meet very prominent figures throughout history, but inadvertently creates a time paradox, and all this bad stuff happens, stuff like that. It was just a quick outline, quick plot, but it goes to show you that concepts that are used, that are being misused, can be written and created into a better concept, in my opinion, than what the media, the mainstream media, has been feeding us. Because I'm like, man, that would have been such a great movie, because I was totally down to watch it. And then I watched the trailer, and I'm like, oh God, what a missed opportunity there. Not everything has to be racially motivated, but that's the society we live in today. So
The last time travel show that I watched that was good was Lifeline by Corridor. And they weren't going back in time, they were actually going forward in time. It was a pretty interesting show.
yeah, I mean, we've never had I mean, the Flash does that, going back and forth through time and messing with stuff. But I've never seen, like what you said, a concept in which time travel was used to go forward. Usually, people are trying to go back to undo something or to see something. No one ever really goes forward to see what something is going to be, at least as a regular plot point in a story or concept. So that's interesting too, because people think of time travel. Let's make time travel and go back in time. It's like no one ever really thinks to go forward, and that's interesting in itself. Probably
Okay,
blew my mind there.
so in Lifeline, basically the entire concept of the show is insurance.
Hmm.
And this insurance company invents time travel, but they're only able to travel forward and never back. So they inject their customers with these tablets or nanobots, and when they die in the future, they send a agent 30 days from the past to the future to save them, and that would create a new parallel timeline, and the guy will return back to the original timeline,
Huh, that's a pretty
which would
decent
create.
insurance policy.
So if you ever get assassinated or killed, that was basically the entire concept of the show. But it was kind of like the movie Looper, if you ever saw that.
Yeah, I saw Looper. That was a pretty good movie. Kind of confusing at the end, but I had to watch it again and kind of understand. Like, okay, what the hell is this? But see, like again, like I would watch something like that. An insurance company who I would assume maybe it was a life insurance company. Whenever
Yeah,
the
it was.
guy dies, they just jump back into the future, prevent them from dying, and come back. That's brilliant, actually. That's probably one of the best insurance policies that anyone could ever have.
No, the other use still did, but it goes back to the future and creates a new timeline where you didn't die.
Yeah. So I mean, theoretically, you're creating a new. Well, according to Avengers, you would create a a new alternate reality. But erasing the future, yeah, you would create a different reality timeline that wouldn't necessarily skew off. But I mean, time travel is confusing when you're trying to think about it. But I get what you're saying, though, for sure.
Uh, I think I really want to talk about Wicked because I actually started writing a portion of it,
Yeah, yeah,
but I'm
yeah.
not
Give
sure
me
what I
let
can.
me share my screen real quick because I have your Kickstarter opened up right here. So
But
let
I'm
me.
not entirely sure what to say without spoiling key plot points.
Well,
I
how about this? How
much
about you explain your main character and kind of go from there.
uh the how can I in this story I really didn't have a main character in the sense that I have multiple focal characters that the story zeroes in on, and I focus on those characters and I jump back and forth between them.
Hmm.
Uh, I'm not going to talk about the pilot because I pretty much reserve myself to never talk about the pilot because I'll just end up spoiling what initially happens. But like in video game development, normally the first game is proof of life or proof of concept that says, well, this is what I have here. And if people play it and people buy it, I'll just really pop off on the second installment. And that's where the story can get crazy and more innovative. Uh,
Okay.
the pilot is pretty much that. Uh, so I'm going to be talking about the main story right now because that's that's pretty much the safe zone. So in my interview I did with the Bleeding Cool, with I'm not good with names, but what I don't know what his name is. But when I did an interview with the Bleeding Cool, I explained that the core theme of the story was about entropy and decay, and the decay of morality as time initially goes on. In Wicked, the entire scenario is that a fantasy universe ended in the sense that it was just the end. Everyone died within the universe for whatever mysterious reasons that I know that I definitely can't say. I was about to say it, but I didn't. But everyone died in this other universe, and mysteriously, basically, that dead universe collides with our universe, and it creates this hodgepodge or this universe of sci-fi sensibilities mixed with fantasy. And now the dead are coming back to life,
Okay.
and people are basically being people that died in the fantasy world are being teleported to our reality. It's the entire concept of recreators, but it's completely different.
Okay. Makes sense. I
Now,
following a little
when
bit.
the story starts, I have to be very careful with this. The first story arc is called "Extinction is the Rule,"
Okay.
And I can say this confidently, the entire story arc is a very X-Men like story arc in the sense that you have the people that say, well, these people are coming from this other universe. They don't belong here, so let's just kill all of them. But unlike the X-Men, there's a pretty justified reason why you would consider genocide in this entire scenario. When everyone died in the universe, I mean, not like Thanos that snapped all life,
Mm-hmm.
or well, like Thanos that snapped all life. I mean, literally everything died. The flowers, the trees, the ants, the insects, the people, anything that was sentient or pretty much grew died and is being teleported to our Earth. Meaning that it's not only people being teleported over, it's the monsters, the flowers, the insects, the
And that's where you kind of come up with
the
these guys down here.
ecosystem.
These guys are like monsters or so what, right?
Yeah, the
Okay.
ecosystem, pretty much everything. But in the beginning of the story, which takes place in the first 100 days where all this is happening, because everything doesn't get teleported right away, basically, the world is hit with this global catastrophe of no one understanding what's going on, of basically diseases are coming in from the other universe to our universe. And due to the very fact that no one's really equipped to deal with any of these foreign bacteria from this completely other universe, because physics works completely different over there, because magic existed over here and we have science over here. No one knows how to cure it, so people are just dying in masses. And people at this current time in the story where the story starts, like 15 million people die.
Uh-huh.
And a guy named Amadeus Quinn, who died on Earth and got teleported to the fantasy world, then came back to Earth when the fantasy universe died, pretty much said, I have this plan to kill every single person that's from the fantasy universe that's on this side. And that's where actually issue 1 leads off. But that's not the big cliffhanger. I can say that for sure. But as the story initially progresses, it's basically this big revelation of how the fantasy universe came into existence, why people are being teleported to this other side of the universe, and what is initially going on. And at the end of the story arc, that's actually going to segue into the crossover I was going to do with Bill for Punchline, but I'm not sure if I can, or we are initially doing it, because first I have to get the comic initially released.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of things I want to talk about in regards to the comics. But like I said, I don't want to spoil it. For example, in our reality, Africa is a very desolate uh,
Continent?
country in this, yeah, continent. And basically, when the fantasy world gets teleported to our world, a person that we're just going to refer to this person as the Lord of Alchemy uses magic to basically enhance Africa to the point where it becomes technologically or magically advanced. And it actually becomes somewhat of a world power. You have entire cities just appearing out of nowhere. For example, in New York City, there's actually 3 additional cities within New York. One called Jump City, another called Dead Side City, and the third one, I totally forgot what it's called, but I do have it written down. So there's a lot of things going on with this story. For example, another random thing or another random fact is that the Earth got 30% or 75% bigger to accommodate all of this other stuff that is happening within the universe. But to talk about some of the characters, the interesting thing, or one of the focal characters that the first issue focuses on, is a character called Sunny and another character called Gwendolyn.
And those are the two that are right here.
No,
Nope. Okay.
that's a different character. When I made the Indiegogo, I had no clue what the hell I was doing, so I just grabbed some random pictures, and I said, well, this wouldn't be a big plot spoiler thing, and I had to make it, or I thought I should make it non-canonical, so
Mm-hmm.
people couldn't piece together what initially is happening.
Okay. Makes sense.
But Gwendolyn is basically, oh, I was about to say a spoiler again, but when she was in the fantasy world, she got married to a man that came from Earth to the fantasy world. And when she died, she got teleported to Earth, but her husband's not there, and she had kids with him. And all, I was about to say, okay, let's just say all of them are dead.
Okay.
And the last thing people remember that were in the fantasy world that are being traveled to Earth is the last moments of her life. And she remembers all her children were killed, including her, were murdered by an assassin.
Hmm.
And that's where
Okay.
the pilot initially takes place. But when issue 1 starts, she doesn't remember this because she just got teleported and she really doesn't know what's going on. So she doesn't have initial time to think about what's really going on.
Okay.
When it comes to Sonny's character is honestly like Spider-Man. He's had powers for a very long time because people with powers existed within this world. Actually, I can say directly when people with powers showed up because I actually wrote all this down. People with powers in this world started appearing in 1908. It's a specific date, and I chose that specific date for a particular reason. The people started showing up with powers in 1908, but the story takes place in 2019. And it's going to be revealed that people have been coming and going from the fantasy world into our world consecutively. Another interesting thing, or something that I focused on, or something that's going to be brought up in issue 1, is that it turns out the reality, or the science reality, that the story now takes place in, which we can just call Wicked Universe, originally that was a steampunk universe. But someone from the fantasy world came and basically said, no, that's inefficient, and brought electrical wiring technology over. And that's how basically the Industrial Revolution changed from steam to electrical technology. And as the story continues on throughout the first story arc, we're going to learn that key events in history, I'm not going to say which ones, were actually being altered by the people that came from the other universe to ours.
Yeah, I like that concept where you use kind of like history to explain certain concepts in works of fiction. That's pretty. It helps you kind of like, well, what if this happened? What if the reason why Edison figured out the whole thing with the light bulb was that information from.
Yeah, that's basically what happens.
Yeah.
Some guy that comes from another universe comes to ours with magic, and he's shooting lasers out of his hands and everything. He's like, hey, what if you could harness this? And bam, you got electricity.
Yeah, that's kind of like the ancient alien theory, how like Earth was visited by extraterrestrials, and key points in history were like these aliens giving us all this tech, which is why we advance so fast, and like stuff like that you can use in concepts when it comes down to trying to get that creativity spark going. A lot of people, they use real life events these days to kind of explain some of the concepts in their work, and I'm one of them. I love that idea of like, well, what if this was true? And if it was true, how can I mold this into a compelling concept in order to write a book or a comic?
Now, the interesting thing about Wicked is that you got to remember in the 1990s, several things, or 1900 to 2000, things happened. World War I, World War II, Vietnam, and the Cold War. So I will say there is involvement from the other universe interacting with those certain events, especially something that's a key plot point later that is also brought up in the first story arc. But in the first issue, you'll see the remnants of where technology was going. For example, there's steampunk-like ships or steampunk-like helicarriers flying around that are just powered by steam. Then you have these other ones made of metal. Then you have these cities that were pretty much going towards steam production that are slowly becoming or being replaced with metal. Things like that. But talking about the first story arc again and the other interesting things, I'm trying to be very selective about what characters I talk about. I'll just talk about Sunny. Sunny has a power or the ability to basically teleport. And not only does he have the ability to teleport, it's pretty much omniscient teleportation. In the sense that he can teleport things by looking at them, teleport things by hovering his hand over them, and he can pretty much teleport things to the other side. And he had this power since he was a kid, but he had no clue why he has it. Now, there is a reason why he has it that I can't say. I was going to say it, but luckily I stopped myself. But his... I can't say it. I don't know what to say.
Don't say it. Leave a little meat on the bone for the reader.
New character. let's talk about my entire introspection as superheroes. Believe it or not, I don't really like superheroes. As baffling as this is, even though I'm writing a superhero comic, I don't like superheroes. I'm more interested in the villain than the actual hero.
I
I
think a lot
find
of people are. I think a lot of people are more interested in a well-developed villain than they are heroes, because
so.
heroes are mostly overrated sometimes.
Here's the interesting thing about Wicked: when the entire people are being transported to the other side, people are coming up with these theories. And one of the theories that's going to be introduced into the first issue, because there's an entire section of the story where basically you're going to see like a Reddit thread of what people think are happening. A lot of people that are being teleported back into our reality are awful people. Like serial killers are coming back, mass murderers are coming back, people that are just flat awful. And what people originally believe, or some people online initially believe, is that Earth is actually hell. And for whatever reason, when people die from the fantasy world, they get sent here. But remember what I said: when people die on Earth, they get sent to the fantasy world.
Mm-hmm.
And some people believe that Earth is hell, or the fantasy world is hell. The fantasy world is honestly like this giant war world. Well, basically, Earth, as we see it now, is slowly transforming into what the fantasy world was before it died.
Okay.
So that's something pretty interesting. I do elaborate on that later, and I do explain other theories that people initially concoct within this world. But when it comes to characters, I'll talk about one specifically. I'll talk about two specifically, actually. There's one character called Strix, and Strix is honestly somewhat similar to Bullseye from Marvel Comics.
Okay.
He has godly like accuracy, and he's very good at killing people. All his well, he's not a sociopath, or I mean a psychopath like Poindexter, but in the sense that his entire well, I can talk about the characters that exist in this reality because it's fairly ordinary. I don't have like extraordinary powers like, well, a tesseract blows up in his face and now he can fly and shoot lasers out of him. Basically, Strix, for whatever reason, is just good at throwing knives with pinpoint accuracy and shooting people really good.
Okay, that makes sense.
Goes he goes along and he joins the military and then he leaves. But because the entire situation of people go serve their country and things don't turn out quite right when they come back, Strix becomes an assassin. But he does try. I'm not going to say, if you read the new Kick-Ass by Mark Miller, it's about a woman and she puts on a costume and runs a mafia now. I haven't been up to date with that story, but basically she went to Afghanistan, she came back, she's like on the bills, and it's a struggle to pay. And without really trying to get a job, she joins the mafia. She doesn't join the mafia. She pretty much beats everyone up and she starts running the mafia.
Hmm.
For the case of Strix's character, he comes back, he really, really tries, but eventually he just falls in and he becomes an assassin. Now, when he becomes an assassin, he kills a lot of people and does a lot of things on behalf of the mob and the mafia. But when the story starts, the interesting thing is, this goes back into world building again. There's so many interesting things I want to say about this world, but I can't. But due to the very fact that, once again, I point this out again, the fantasy world is coming to our reality. No one knows what's going on. So there's like a huge boom in private security, military contracts, and everything. And Strix is like, this is my out. I can finally get out of the thumb of all these assassins. I don't got to be looking over my shoulder. So he tries to get out. And we're basically going throughout the process of having this somewhat John Wick #1 like plot.
Mm-hmm.
He basically just attempts to kill everyone and just move on his life and join a private security contractor company or go back into the military and live his normal life and not have to look over his entire shoulder. The entire conflict against this is that there's another character that's very similar to Daredevil within this story, and he has his entire own plot line going on, but eventually they're going to cross paths, and they both have their own type of personality, and it's explained very well why they do what they do. So there's a conflict between the two characters, and they have very good motivations to why they should be fighting for the right thing. Strix is not this, oh boy, I'm mega evil, I do evil things for evil reasons type of character. He's presented as a human being. He's just not a complete psychopath.
Mm-hmm.
But then you have, the hero character. I'm not going to say does good things for good reasons. To be honest, to some certain degree, this character likes beating up people, and he justifies it by putting on a costume to go beat up people. And because he doesn't kill anyone, he feels good about himself.
Mm-hmm.
But both of them have motivations. But there's this other plot line that I got to talk about if I got to talk about this.
Go for it.
They'll eventually cross paths, and it's the question of, well, is Strix going to kill Tempest, because that's his name, or is Tempest going to beat the hell out of Strix and throw him in jail?
Got you.
I'm going to say this is not a black and white story, because morality is very gray, and I don't like stories where the hero always wins, because there's some importance in the story where the villain would either flat out win, or maybe the hero will win for once. Extinction is the rule pretty much settles the reader into that entire idea. But talking about the other plot line, I'm basically writing everything that I'm going to write if I ever worked at Marvel or DC. I had this cool idea for a Batman story. Man, I shouldn't. But anyway, I don't know if I could say it.
I would say, a lot of people, I've said this on past interviews, that indie comic creators are up and coming. A lot of people they're not buying Marvel comics anymore. They're not buying DC comics as much anymore. And if they're seeing a steady decline, those companies are seeing a steady decline in their revenue, mainly because a lot of people are starting to go towards independent comics. And that's an awesome thing, in my opinion, because you have platforms like Indiegogo and Kickstarter to where you can come up with an idea, write something, and of course go ahead and make it happen. As far as, I don't know, something like Batman, I'm pretty sure you're gonna have to get something like a rights or something like that from DC. And DC is dicks. They're all dicks. DC and Marvel are dicks. They like to hang on to whatever they can get and penny pinch anything they can. So, but I get what you're coming from. There's a lot of stuff out there right now that are going around, and a lot of writers and a lot of artists are saying, I could probably do that better, because most of the storylines that they're coming up with, they suck. Wally West just completely blew up in the last issue of the Flash. Yeah, I'm like, why?
Peter Tomasi, he's the man.
Yeah, they could have done, when they first introduced Godspeed into the Rebirth Flash, they could have done so much more with that character, but it was just a 6-issue run, and I don't even know where to even begin with that. But I just stopped reading the Flash and DC comics altogether. The only comic that I read religiously is Boom Studios' Go-Go Power Rangers and Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. It's those are like my bread and butter from month to month. So those are my little guilty pleasures. But a lot of people like myself are getting more into the indie circuit when it comes down to stuff like this. Like, this sounds like a really great story that I would not book back immediately, and I'm going to back it after we get done here, because it's something that I want to get into in terms of multiverse travel and the concept that you explained. And it seems something very, very, very compelling, and it sounds like something that I would read, because it kind of has science and a little bit more of an anime touch to it, but at the same time, it just seems like an overall good story put together, 100%.
I've been talking about the science universe so much, I completely forgot to mention there's story arcs that take place in the fantasy universe.
Well, you don't have to tell me much, because I want to keep a little bit more meat on that bone, because I want to don't reveal too much.
I'm going to say this: while the story's taking place in the Wicked universe, we're going to get flashbacks. I'm not going to say it's exactly like the Arrow CW show, but I will say we'll get flashbacks, and we'll see initially what leads up to the end of the fantasy universe. And it's a pretty meaty backstory.
And I'm looking forward to that. That's one of the things that I like. I like going into something like a book or a movie, a little bit of a premise, but not a lot is being given away. Because even as a writer myself, I've written and published 6 books. Writing the little, blurb or something like that for a book it's very hard because you don't want to give away too much in the beginning to where people aren't compelled to read your book, but you don't want to give away too little to where people are going to be like, well, what the hell is this? I don't want to read this. This doesn't really compel me. You have to face the right things in a right kind of way to compel people in order for your book or comic book to sell. You know what I mean? It's really difficult to do that. And when it comes down to kind of like explaining the backstory of a certain planet or a world or a character or a villain, stuff like that, those kind of things you want to keep under wraps, but also kind of allude to it that there's more to what I'm just showing you now. There's going to be more in terms of people coming full circle and giving away their backstories, stuff like that. So the whole fantasy world thing, like I'm really curious, like why is it starting to merge with the Earth plane of existence? So don't tell me because I really want to know from firsthand once I get my hands on your book for sure.
Yeah, I won't tell you, but we'll see other things. Man, this goes over like the entire thing. What I wanted to do with Bill Punchline. Like I said, it was supposed to go extinction is the rule. Then after that, if I can, with Bill, I'll do Wicked X Punchline, and that story is called The End of Forever. I haven't talked to Bill about that, so I don't know how much of my elements that I can keep into the story, because Punchline is completely tonally different than what I'm writing.
Mm-hmm.
My universe is kind of dark. His is very happy. So
Okay.
there will be a problem. There's a major conflict of tonal shifts. But this also goes into doppelgangers. I'm surprised you actually hadn't brought that up yet. Gotta remember, this is parallel multiverse theory.
I would have figured that doppelgangers would have played a part into it for sure, since you're incorporating
So
parallel
you have,
universes and
you
realities.
have the you got the characters. For example, you got Strix. I was talking about him earlier. There's a version of him that exists in the sci-fi Wicked universe, but then you got to remember there's a version of him from the fantasy universe. So even though we have Strix, who's this there was this soldier that became an assassin. His life turned out completely differently on this fantasy universe. And maybe he's something completely else. And you got to remember, the universes are merging. So Strix might meet Strix, science Strix might meet magic Strix, and they could have an entire relationship or some type of personality. Hell,
Mm-hmm.
he may just kill the other version of him and take his life or take his place and say, well, that's not me. That was other me.
Yeah, when you're dealing with multiverses and stuff like that, and alternate realities, even alternate timelines, it kind of leaves the door open for the possibilities of anything can happen. Because with an infinite theory like the multiverse, gives you infinite possibilities to write certain concepts and stories that maybe you hadn't considered dealing with one world. And I think that's where a lot of creativity comes from, is the idea that there is a multiverse. There could be one in your story. There could be one in my stories. We don't know. But whenever you have something happening within one universe, like for example, my last interview was with a group of people who wrote the mythos. The mythos, and it's basically three artists, and they're sharing their stories within one universe, which begs the question: if this is all one universe, is there a multiverse? And if so, do your characters exist on another Earth? And so on and so forth. So it kind of brings up those questions that a lot of writers like myself like to play with, because you can do anything and make it compelling to an extent to where people are familiar with one group of characters from one Earth, and then you can introduce them to a same set of characters from a different Earth, but they're completely different. It
Mm.
makes it makes really good for compelling. But yeah, we're kind of running low on time though. I really do like your concept, and like I said, I will be back in your project. Is there anything else you would like to add before we finish up here?
Uh, I got to think about it for a few seconds. Um, I want to say, oh man, I have nothing else to say. Anything else, I would just spout out spoilers.
No, we don't want spoilers. But hey, guys, if you guys like this interviews with Ouros, please go back his Indiegogo Wicked. The link will be in the comment section below. You have about 12 days left, and we're trying to get this thing funded. Do you have it to where if it's not funded, you will still produce the book, or how's that working?
The I have no clue. I guess I would have to ask the people that gave
Okay.
me their money. Oh yeah, and the other thing I wanted to talk about, like I said, is about people coming back from the dead in the first issue.
Mm-hmm.
So of course I would talk about emotional stuff, like maybe a parent's child died and they came back. But you also got to remember, a lot of people think that maybe Earth is hell, or very possibly the apocalypse is happening. So the entire scenario is in the first issue that I talk about. This is very light stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Basically, there's this mom and her dead kid came back, maybe 12, 13 years old. Oh man, okay, I'm just gonna say it. But the plot twist is he's like this walking, decaying corpse, but she can tell it's her kid for sure because she's the mom. And like the people in the village and stuff, like, we gotta put that kid down. That's like hellspawn or some type of thing. We gotta kill it. And of course that leads to, I'm just gonna say it, it's not shenanigans, but it leads to stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And things happen.
Okay.
It was about
Well,
that too. A
sounds
lot of the
good.
stories about loss and recovering from that loss because it's coming back. People are coming back.
That
That
sounds
has positives and negative effects.
for sure. Sounds very interesting, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you got going on. But hey, I got to wrap it up here. Kind of running past my time limit, but I'm really excited to see what you got, what you and your team do with this story. And if when it does get funded, and I got my book, I can promise you that I'm going to be interested in part two, whatever it is you guys decide to come up with. So, again, thank you for coming on the show. You got any questions for me per se before we end?
Uh, hmm. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem. If you ever do a Kickstarter or Indiegogo or a webcomic or whatever, just keep me in mind. I would love to have you on the show again.
Okay.
All right. You have a good night.
All right. Bye.
Bye. And that's it for this episode of Indie Choice Picks. If you like this episode, please give it a like, and of course subscribe, share, and remember to support all indies everywhere. So if you are an indie comic book creator of any sort and you would like to come on the show, all you have to do is find me on my Twitter at Heroic Studios. That's heroic_studios, and on my Instagram, Will at Heroic Studios. I hope to get you guys on the show. I am scheduling for June. And like I said, if you have a campaign or Indiegogo that's going to start funding within the next few weeks and you want to get in on an interview, please give me a shout out on either Instagram and Twitter. I will see you next time with another indie creator. You all have a great day. Bye-bye.